My name is Josh, and welcome to Hide and Seek Archives, a podcast where we talk about things supernatural, cryptid, or unexplained. And we are live. Today we've got Robert Kryder. How you doing, Robert?
Good.
Thank you for coming on. Robert, what got you into the subject of Sasquatch?
I'll start with thank you guys for having me on this evening. It's my pleasure to be here. So, I've always had a curiosity and probably been exposed to paranormal since a really young age. I mean, even the infancy. So, and then of course I've heard family stories and whatnot because my family's always been high country ranchers, and they broke a lot of virgin land and were some of the early settlers and stuff. So we had a lot of family history and a lot of family tales. And then of course having our ranch up in northern New Mexico up to Alpine and even above Timberline and stuff. The locals there all had their stories, their generational Spanish from the old days still in there. And so, I was always exposed to hearing it. And then I think when I was about 4 years old, we took our first trip into Canada. And of course, I didn't know at that young age what I was witnessing, but there's a big lore up there, and there's all kinds of carvings and totems and everything of it, and a Bigfoot or Sasquatch or whatever. And so I remember even then, though, there was things going on. And, we got into a lake that was real remote, 60 miles long and 2 miles wide, called Quinnell Lake. And there was no roads until some logger cut his own. And we went in there with his family on the first trip. And when we got in there, I remember there was for a little while there, we were outside, and there was a tree fall about every, 30 seconds or a minute, probably another 20 or 30 of them in total, and that was the first exposure. And then I remember them talking about it then. And then I guess when I was 14 on a BMX bike in Washington State, cruising down a hill by myself, where I usually went with a bunch of friends, and I did a jump and had one scream at me from really close range. Never saw it. One of those things where you're heading one direction in the air, and in midair you change your direction of travel and go back the other direction. It was that, and I think, and I knew what that was even as a kid. Being in Vancouver at 14, we heard his stories all the time. So, and then so at a young age, though, that's pretty well what got my interest in it. So, and then I think over the years, I run an exploration company. We get into some pretty off the wall stuff, and it takes us into the most remote locations, usually 8 or 10 miles. You get that deep in anywhere, and you stop seeing beer cans, and you could be somewhere nobody's been in 300 years or whatever. And most of what we did was extremely remote. And like I said, and we were working in some of the most rugged country on purpose, because it was where things were hidden in the past. And we were running into these things, pretty frequently. They were certainly no secret. And I guess 95, I videotaped one about the time they came out with cameras that would do a decent job. And then after that, it just went down the line. And we really didn't go any hardcore. We went out and looked for them a little bit and messed with it over the years after 95, but we really didn't focus too heavy on it until about 2010. And the advent of the internet and stuff. And we put up videos and everything. And I saw what was out there in 2010, and it was already, going this direction and that. And it was difficult to watch because there was a lot of hocus pocus and a lot of fun being made. And it's a pretty serious thing. If you've been out there like we had, you spent most of your life in the hills, probably as much as anyone else has spent inside of a house, and in these remote areas, and just having so much, I'm not going to say experience in research, but experience just being around them. And them being just a fact of life out there, and the native cultures we got to know over those years doing that kind of recovery work and things, to them, same thing. So you just get a matter of fact attitude about them. And, hundreds and hundreds of encounters probably over that 30-year period of time. And then you get online and you begin to see all this hype. And even in 2010, things started to stir around so many side avenues, and a lot of it comes from good intentions, but it's people that don't really have the opportunity to be out there living with them, you know. So the mind thinks up a lot of just justifications for how they are, what they, you know, or what we want them to be. And I think that's what kicked it off right there was, you know, just, I think we've always been into revealing truth, and that's been our whole thing, is to be a thorn and the authorities' ass, so to speak, about information and knowledge. And we really have. That's what we've always tried to do. I mean, since the early 90s. And this was just another one. You know, academia's got the lid on it, you know, let alone media, whatever, the media engine. But yeah, there's a definite government lid and academic lid. And then you see the people that are getting interested being taken down this avenue or down that avenue. And it just, you know, when you have that information and experience, makes you want to come up and try to bring clarity, I guess. So that's how it all started.
Okay. And what was your first experience that you ever had that really got you going?
Like I said, well, we worked on a recovery project for 8 years total, but I stayed on the site for 8 months by myself in a tent. And some of the crew would come and go. They'd bring in supplies and such. And during that entire 8 months, I had encounters with a large one that we nicknamed Harry. And he's just a matter of being there. And he was around a lot. So we'd operate equipment, blasting and drilling and everything. We'd do a lot of it at night. And you know, you'd feel that presence or whatever. And then we had a few run-ins with him. And they got pretty substantial. Even all my crew, you know, all those guys were pretty skeptical, and they're hardcore guys, but yet at the same time, yeah, they're pretty skeptical. So but they all had their one-on-one run-ins. And I think one of notoriety is when we were coming out one night, and this one actually put one of my bigger guys in shock for about 30 minutes. And we were coming out of the dig site, and a buddy of mine had gone straight across the river, and he was going to go get his truck and then swing around on the highway and pick us up. And we were going to walk straight out to the highway. And to do so, we had to go down through some dark river bottoms. And, you know, when you're working at night all the time, you don't even bother with lights. You know where the trail, you can see the trail in the dark. But of course you can't see it well. And so we're going through this grove of trees in the river bottom. And usually you can make out the lighter blue phase to where the trail is ahead of you and the break in the trees. And you just kind of meander that direction. And as we started to enter, it looked good. And then all of a sudden it just got black in there. And so trying to find the trail ahead of me, I was in the lead. And I was trying to find the trail ahead of me, and I couldn't see it. I mean, usually, sorry, there's a cat in the way. Usually, that's going to be a deal. So, but right. usually you can see this tunnel, you know, course, and I'm used to going through there. We go through there all the time, and it's probably, I don't know, it's probably 800 foot to 1,000 foot under quarter mile to go through that. And as we did, and like I said, it all went black on me, and it's just like you're looking at a black wall, you know, and I didn't snap right away. And then it wasn't maybe 12 or 14 foot or something like that in front of us. All of a sudden the whole blackness just moved off to my left. Just the whole thing shifted. So all that movement of space. And what it was is he was taking up the entire area in the trail that we always pass through. He was just filling that entire void. And of course, couldn't see him because he was, you know, moonlight against back through trees and everything. And so, but you could see certainly when he moved out of the way. And so when that big shift happened, guy right behind me caught it. I caught it, and the 3 or 4 guys behind him didn't. And including the big guy who kind of went into shock. And he was, I think, 3rd or 4th in the line. And then when we came out of those trees, we came out in the moonlight. We came out about 100 feet from the guardrail on that highway there. And then there was to our left is where it went down into the river bottoms that guy had crossed. And so there was a bridge, a concrete overpass bridge over that. And right in front of that guardrail, when I broke out of the trees, I could see, and I came out right in front of that guardrail, about 8 feet from the guardrail, probably on my side, was a big form hunched over. And when I say hunched over, you know, I mean, it was kind of vertical and with a ball, you know, just like that vertical with the ball, stumpy looking shape, all dark. And I stopped everybody and I leaned forward and I said, "What's that?" Well, the 2 guys right behind me, one that had seen the movement and the other guy hadn't, and he was the big guy, Gary. And they both kind of looked around me a little bit, and we took that, you know, you lean in and you try to get a hard look. And it was him. He'd actually moved. We never heard him move as we walked, and he had moved out from in front of us in the trail. And I got to say that too. So when I saw that, I stopped and I didn't know what to do. And I thought, well, I'm just going to walk forward anyway, because all these guys are behind me. I'm certainly not going to look like a puss or whatever in front of all this, you know what I mean? So, and all these guys, especially, and here I am supposed to be leader. And so I did. We just walked out. Well, I expected to just walk on by this thing. And it had moved around and got in front of us. And I guess probably going to cross the highway. When we came out, it ducked down. And so, but we took notice of it, and it realized we were looking at it that close and paid attention. It stood up. And it just sprang from that crouched position with its legs. Its legs were erect, but its body was bent all the way over in a ball. And it went from that to just stand up to a run. And it took one big step, another big step, went over a barbed wire fence, and then there was a bunch of big salt cedar trees. It's the kind of tree that we have in the river bottoms out here, and they're real durable. They'll take a tremendous amount of beating. And, of course, he just exploded right through those. And one of them made just a huge bang, loud like a shotgun. And it's probably 4 or 6 inch thick. And for salt cedar, you tie your truck to it, you ain't going to pull it out if it's that size. And he went right through it and just mowed it and blew it apart. And that break, when he heard that break, the big guy, Gary, behind my right, he just locked up. That was it. He just locked up, froze. And I tried to get him to move. And I told the other guy that was right behind me, I said, well, watch Gary for a minute. I got to see where this thing went. And I figured it went down under the bridge and took off. And I went out on top of that bridge. And the bridge is probably 18 or 20 foot above the sand level. And I'll tell you what, when I was in the middle of the bridge and there was no noise and I couldn't see any tracks in the moonlight where it went down the river bottom and I couldn't hear anything, then it really got me then, because I realized that dude's still under this bridge. He hadn't gone anywhere. And now I'm on the middle of the bridge and I have to walk back over him. And even though I was 20 foot off the ground, I didn't feel safe. It didn't feel good. And, but I got back to the end and the edge. And by then they had Gary up near the guardrail. And I say they had him up there because they were having to push and pull on him to get him up there. And he was repeating words, and the words he was repeating was, hey, Bubba, hey, Bubba. And I mean, that's all he could say is, hey, Bubba, hey, Bubba. And so right about then, Jackie pulled up in the pickup from across the way over there over the bridge, and he came right in. And we opened the door, and Jackie just looked at him and said, my God, what happened to him? Because he was pale. Gary's eyes were just bugged out. And he was still just repeating, hey, Bubba, hey, Bubba. And he couldn't say anything. That's it. He was gone. So we tried to tell Jackie real quick what he saw, but so we got him in the pickup and everybody loaded in the back and we drove off to the house. And I think it was about 30 minutes after it initially happened that he finally finished his sentence. And he said, hey, Bubba, that first break would have taken me out. And he was trying to say that for 30 minutes and he couldn't get it out. So, I think that was probably, the first encounter like that started everything back up again as far as, on a personal basis or close basis.
How big would you say that thing was, or could you tell?
We filmed him later. He's a monster. So at 10 to 12.
Wow.
Yeah. So we filmed him up on a ridge line, and he's at it's over a half mile. It's probably closer to 3/4 of a mile. And with real early digital cams with early image stabilization, but it had, I think, 10 power optical and 12 power digital. And I zoomed it all the way in, so I'm shaky as hell. I didn't have enough experience with that camera. And I think we only shot about 45, 50 seconds of it. And because we were going to another little treasure site, and we weren't supposed to be where we were. And we were on a jog in the evening trying to get in and out real quick. And so we filmed 45, 50 seconds and then took off. And but, yeah, where he was standing, he was over just on the other side of a ridge line. And he was from about the genitalia area or hip area up. You could actually see his genitalia. So right below that up, he was exposed. And so right below the genitalia area, he was covered. And then when we went up and looked and I stood where he was at 2 weeks later, I could barely see over that hill. And so he was every bit of twice my height. I mean, I could just barely, I don't even know if I could see where we were standing down the bottoms or not. He was that tall. So yeah, he's big.
So you experienced him for several years, you said?
Yeah. 8 years on and off. Yeah.
Was he ever aggressive, or was pretty much the
no
behavior? Or
no, Harry wasn't aggressive. No, matter of fact, that's kind of why we nicknamed him Harry.
Okay.
And he was around a lot. I mean, and he'd let you know he's around. He wasn't shy about stomping around, and we never ever, not once, did we ever go, oh, there he is, and go over there and try to follow him or anything like that. Because we're digging and we're doing our own thing, and we have to be observant because we've had gunfights on sites before, so people try to come in behind you and black bag you and look, see what you're doing and whatever. And so we always are really highly vigilant, so we know what's moving around. but he wasn't real shy about it, but he never was intimidating. So I never even got that feeling. It was, I guess if you had any feeling off him at all, it was basically like, well, this is his river, and he's just letting us do what we're doing because we're just digging holes, basically. I don't.
Well, I've always been curious as to the differences in behavior with them. If you're in you're talking about super remote areas where there's no other people coming through, right? So
yeah,
I've always wondered if their behavior, how they would respond knowing that you're the only ones out there, if they're more aggressive or less aggressive, or, compared to the ones, when you're 2 hours outside of the city somewhere where there's a lot, Sam Houston, for example, where we go to, there's a lot of there's a lot of activity out there, but there's also a lot of people. They tend to be somewhat aggressive sometimes. And I'm sure it probably has to do with some of the encounters they've had with people. I'm just guessing, assuming, in situations they've been in. So I've always, kind of wondered, what they, how they would respond to people when you get out in real remote areas like that,
Well, the location I just mentioned isn't that remote of a location. It is a high value treasure site, but it's not that far from main roads and highways. And there's ranchers and there's cattle and there's ranches around it. And some of them are pretty big or whatever, but I'm sure they're used to seeing pickups, cattle, guys feeding cattle, processing, doing whatever. We have encountered, aggressive individuals, both in areas where there's human habitation, and in areas where it's remote. The extremely remote seem to be, how would you say, a little more off, or they're not right up in your face doing it. So a little more offhanded intimidation, and it can get pretty sketchy, but the ones near habitation, I think they can almost be worse. When they want to run you off, they know what it takes to run a person off, and they'll damn sure do it, and they'll come in closer to you. And I think, they're even more intimidating,
Right.
You got any other questions, Josh?
So this hairy fella, you said was he all black, or was he? Did he have different color hair? Or
so Harry's kind of black and charcoal gray and a little bit of gray. So darker areas are inside the arms and inside the elbows, you could see, and so he was a little bit variegated in color. Well, hi, Miracle, how you doing? So he's a little variegated in color as far as that goes, but overall, no red. I didn't really notice a red tone to him or a brown tone, more just black and a charcoalish with gray, something like that. So.
And with him or any of the other individuals you came across, did you ever get a good look at their faces or their eyes?
Oh yeah. So yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, what in particular? Yeah, I have several times.
Well, their eyes. Were all their eyes similar? Did they seem different based on each individual? What was your experience with that?
They vary about as much as people do. So I think there is kind of a look. It's kind of like we see people today that we look at them, we think they're a relic caveman walking the streets today, right? We've seen some of these big guys, with big brow ridges and strong features like that. And I'd have to say that everything I've seen verily looks like that, but not like the younger individual I've seen that's about 7 foot. I've seen him pretty good, and these guys are nuts. So they really are. When they know I'm doing something, they're in the middle of it. So, so I saw a younger one we named George, and he's kind of got reddish hair, and he didn't look that much that way. His head was a little more rounder. His brows and stuff were not as pronounced.
Mm-hmm.
But most of them real heavy brow. I see a lot of pictures online. Of course, you'll have a picture. We'll have like 20 different images of Bigfoot, and everyone's got their opinion on what they look like. And I guess it's easier to pick what they don't look like, because you can definitely, once you've seen a few, and it's just like people, you can look at it and go right off the bat and go, well, that's not what they look like. Because they don't, everything I've seen, I've never, ever seen anything yet that's so apish that I would say on the monkey side or ape side. Every single thing I've ever seen definitely looks like what you would describe as caveman and above. I mean, it goes in the man category for sure. Eyes, not real big eyes when they're in the daylight. I mean, if they're opening up their eyes to look around or something, but from what I've seen, you could describe them as kind of beady eyes, even though I'm sure they're huge eyeballs. But small in the sockets basically, because the sockets look pretty deep set. Brow ridge is pretty straight, doesn't curve down much on the sides. Matter of fact, there's everything I've seen, even the female, I've seen a couple of females, everything I've seen, there's, the brow ridges don't descend. A lot of times you'll see a lot of the drawings and stuff, and they'll have the brow ridge here and it'll drop down, like this, or at an angle, and it's not. Everyone I've seen is almost tilted up in the brow ridge a little bit. Mm-hmm. And that gives the males, males I've seen, gives them a real sketchy look. It looks like a classic monster, like, I don't know if you ever remember, there was old stickers and things that went around back in the day that were called No Fear, and they had a set of eyes that were like that on those, and they remind me a lot of that, because the nose area kind of is tilted, how would I say that? So instead of being very round on the bottom, so they'll come up in a pretty good line from here and go all the way out before they come back up. You've got this whole region here, he's real high on the nose up in the middle of the eyes like this. So that's something I've noticed too. Like this region of the face is bigger or more robust right there next to the nostrils. So their eyes almost have a shape, like this in the eye sockets to them at the edges. So
was it after that you started getting more involved in active research, or, I mean, you were out doing other work at that time when you were experiencing all those, right?
Yeah.
So you, I assume, became more interested in it and got into doing active research.
Yeah, because it was only like Harry and stuff on that deal, and a couple we did go poke around with that are other subjects in the same area. It's the big desert Mesa Lands region. You wouldn't think they were out there, and they are. And there's a couple of big males, and we looked at them too. And that was probably around 2000. Okay. And I think after 2010, 2011 is when I came up online and started to see what was out there, and we started right then. So by 2011 we were already hot on, and it kind of got set right in the backyard, literally, because we moved into a house that right by a canyon where a guy had witnessed one and got a cell phone pic, and we went and looked at that, and no one believed him because there's been no reports there at all ever, but he sure did get a cell phone pic of one, and then we actually got into a house. We rented a house that was right up on that same canyon off a mountain. And sure enough, the subject was coming to that house, 2-3 times a week.
Is that right?
Yeah. And he'd come up. Well, there's some bachelors lived there before us, and they said for 2 years, they just took all their leftovers and threw them over the back deck, and whatever got them. And so after we got in there, of course, then I guess the same habits, he was still coming around. And then we ended up tracking him back up to where he stayed. And which is kind of bad because he was coming around a lot. And then after we did that, he almost quit coming around. But there wasn't anything bad about it or anything. So, but he's tried to get in the oats with the horses and, banged on the house. Felt like it knocked it off the trailer, a big double wide trailer, and felt like it knocked it off the damn foundations one night. Stuff like that, But, and he wasn't, I think he's just probably big young male on the mountain alone. That's how it acted. We went and tracked him and tracked the mountain out, and that's what we saw. We didn't see anything from any other subjects with him, and he's we got eye shine at 9.5 foot, a little over 9.5 foot one night at the campfire that he came and saw us, and subsequently on one trip up there, I lost a pair of glasses and lost them on the mountain. Knew where I lost them, took them off, set them down, didn't put them back on. Knew right where they were at, but it was up on the mountain. We didn't go back and get them. And a year later, they got brought back down to my house and sit on a rock outside the house. Wow. So, yeah, a year later. So
that's funny.
Yeah, I thought that was really, really cool. It showed me there was no animosity anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
On the eye shine, you experience different colors, or just have you experienced different, just clear?
No, amber.
Amber.
Yeah. So dark amber. Some people might call red or whatever, but it's not like not a hardcore red, like a red reflector or tail light. No, like a deeper amber. And then I don't know, almost a yellowy, that's the only thing we've ever caught. Most of what we've caught on all our eye shine stuff's usually using IR, so we're not getting a color report on it.
Oh yeah.
But with the eyes, amber is about all I've seen anyway.
Okay. So you've gotten into developing your own equipment.
Oh yeah.
Over the years.
Yeah, they couldn't find really anything that was geared specifically for this. So everything has great failings, when it comes up into this stuff. So it's nothing's really designed for what we do. So then we ended up doing that ourselves. I think first thing we probably played with hard that was dedicated just to this, because I've always done that for the type of exploration work and underground exploration, stuff like that. We've always put our own equipment together for that. And I think first thing we really applied directly onto this was the parabolic stuff. So back in 2011, I have a mobile laboratory that's built out of a semi truck, 52 foot. And so we had that running in those days. That was all operational for doing our other work. And so we utilized it. And so I had a 30-inch parabolic dish, 22 feet off the ground, positioned on top of that. And then we had a big sound system inside that box, soundproof box, and we would crank that way the hell up with a quadraphonic system and sit there and monitor. So we'd monitor 2 miles to 3 miles, and you could hear footsteps at 2.5, 3 miles. So
that's amazing. I bet you heard all kinds of cool stuff.
Oh yeah, but I mean the gear was pretty cheesy too. So the amount of white noise that we were listening to is deafening inside that box, because your brain will turn it out after a while. It's like if you're riding in a box car or something, it's ungodly loud, but then of course you fall asleep, hear it while you're sleeping. So your brain can filter that stuff out. So we would literally just crank it inside there. And so we could hear every little nuance back in the background, so, but nowadays, of course, that everything's changed now. We can do almost the same thing with an 11-inch dish now and crystal clear. So we've made a lot of headway on the audio side of things,
Well, most of your experience has been in the specific areas, specific states, or have you?
Well, like I said, I've had experience in Washington State and Colorado. So we lived in Real High Pass in Colorado, and had some stuff happen there when I was a kid, and in the 10, 11, 12 years of age, that didn't know what it was directly though, and didn't have a sighting or anything then. And but I'm sure that's what it was now that we know more. And but mostly New Mexico. Most of some Arizona around the Mogollon Rim, and then north of around Flagstaff, Payson, that area up there, Prescott. So I've done a little work over there. So
yeah, are you familiar with the Canales County in Colorado?
Yeah, matter of fact, we used to own the Canales Canyon Inn.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, on top of La Manga Pass.
Okay. Yeah, we're real familiar. We've been up there quite a bit, Platoro and that area.
Yeah, right up there on top of La Manga. There's that's not on top. I think we're just a few miles below the top there at the canal at the inn we used to own there. And I think up above us is only Lobo Lodge, and that's it. And right there, there's some big ponds and stuff behind there on the Canales River. Mm-hmm. And there's a big swamp in there, and they got quicksand and everything else. But there's a subject in there that used to mess with me when I was a kid. I just didn't know what it was.
Oh, okay.
He spooked me out pretty bad. He'd spook me real bad, but I never knew. I didn't have a clue at that time. I didn't put 2 and 2 together when I was 10, 11. So about what that was, but yeah, it's cool. You're familiar with that country, Todd.
Yeah, we've been going there since I was a kid. We go 4-wheeling all back there and fishing and so
it's beautiful.
And I've spoken to a couple of researchers that covered that area. A guy named Keith Foster. I don't know if you're familiar with him, and that used to cover the Canales area and heard a lot of the activity there. I know the Rangers are real familiar with them there.
Yeah. Oh, I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, how could you not be?
Yeah.
That country's horrendous up on top. There's nobody up there. You get away from the highway 2 miles and you're in the remote right then. There's just nobody up there,
Yeah.
A lot of bear.
Yeah, I know we stay in the South Fork area. Kind of in the Rio Grande National Forest, and it gets pretty rugged out there.
Oh yeah, and down in the Gila, that's a lot like that too. It gets pretty rugged. It's not super hardcore big cliffs or anything like that, but it's definitely a lot of vert country. Everything's up and down, hard to find a flat spot.
Right. Last summer, Josh and I went and camped on the top of Blowout Pass. I was hoping we'd hear some audible, hear some screams or something that night, but it was quiet night. But we did see some tree structures up in the area.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And then, have you worked in New Mexico very much at all, Todd? Have you been over here?
I mean, I've never worked there, but I've traveled to well,
I mean, research wise, worked it.
No. I've done Oklahoma, been up Oklahoma, the whole Nubby area, and a couple of times had some experiences up there, and then mainly Sam Houston are pretty much the two locations that I've been mainly in. There's quite a bit of activity down here at Sam Houston, which is hard to believe, as much activity, as much human presence there is in there. There's so many campers and people passing through there, but it doesn't seem to phase the activity. It's pretty
From
amazing.
what I've seen, if they can get a handle on what's going on, from what I've seen, they'll take advantage of it.
Yeah,
and they get a handle on it pretty quick. I mean, on the activity and how attentive people are at whatever activity it is, and yeah, absolutely. And they know how to take advantage of it. That's what some of the sketchiest stuff we've been through. Some of the closest I've been to them are areas that people not necessarily frequent, but definitely go, and they know how to deal with the people that come in. I mean, and you can tell they know just where to go, just when to go there. So, animals are like that. You'll find raccoons that, they know what time you go to bed. And if you turn on the light, all of a sudden they're out there waiting on you, and they actually just do. Right. And, but it's even more so, with these guys. Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. I know I went camping with my dad one time, and we were sleeping in cots outside, and, you're getting ready for bed and everything's all quiet. And as soon as I started laying down in the cot, there's this group of raccoons coming into camp, trying to scavenge for everything, and I'm like, hey, get out of here. And they all go running off, and they wait about 10 more minutes, and they start coming back in. So they they definitely know what to look for.
Oh yeah, they do. No, you get their habits quick.
Well, what are some of the more memorable, or say aggressive, or experiences that you've had that just stick in your mind?
Oh, there's a few. I guess getting hit with a rock, I've told that story quite a bit. That sticks pretty hard. I don't know if you ever heard that one.
I have not.
Yeah, we got in a group when we were doing the study for the University of New Mexico Gallup. We did a year-long field study for the university there. And of course they got blocked and hidden and everything else, so people would never know much about it. But during one of the nights they had us in there on the San Juan River down by Fruitland on the Navajo reservation. Where they put us to camp, we were actually going to go do some work in the Chuska Mountains that following day, to where a real recent witness encounter. We wanted to go collect DNA and do some tracking. And where they put us just to stay the night happened to be a spot, and they sure came in. So we had activity right off the bat, and they got to see, I got to see a little bit, and then George Harvey and J.C. Johnson and Junebug and a couple other researchers there got to see a big male looking over a log, and he was all the way prone on the ground and still barely lay behind a 2.5, 3 foot log, but his eyes were, like this, so his eyes, he must have 2-3 inches of spread, big eyeballs, pretty big boy. And they got to see him, and then I went back in there. They all left, actually. They I think they lost the will a little to stay with him, and then they all left, and I went back in alone, and I got grunted at, which felt like getting hit by a rolled up piece of carpet, and it hit me pretty good. It made me puke for a couple of days. It knocked me pretty weird. Matter of fact, I was kind of out of it mentally a little bit, because I had thermal and all kinds of shit in my pack, and I never even went and got it on. But I stayed in there with them a little bit by myself until I couldn't do it anymore. Laying prone on the sand, getting real close to them and all that, 10, 15 feet in a couple of spots. And they weren't being aggressive. And then I went back in with this Navajo buddy of mine, Junebug, his brother, and we crawled right up in with them. And then it got pretty hairy. And like I say, we're laying prone on the ground, and had one 8 or 10 feet in front of us and one 60 feet to our left. And there was a few more, and trying to keep track of where all of them were moving around, and that was real hairy. And then a young juvenile came out. He came out 2 or 3 times, and we could see him. And it was full moon, and we were on white sand pathway that we had drug so we could see prints if anything came through. The landowner actually did that for us. He drug it all with chain link or something. And so we could see by moonlight down there, and we saw two flashes of dark cross to the left over here, and we didn't know where they went. And I assume they came back around us, because later in the video you can see little rocks coming over us from that direction. And this one juvenile, it was pretty good size. He was probably on all fours and long on all fours, like not standing up like a bear on all fours, but, you know, stretched out, trying to stay low. He's probably 3 foot high at the shoulder. And so he's probably 7 or 8 foot. But he was nervous, I guess. The big male was off 170 to 100 feet away, clicking his teeth. And then we had one medium size that was right in front of us that I was real close to a couple times. And then the juvie, though, he got scared and he crawled out toward the road a couple of times. We'd see him coming up on the road. And this last time I thought he was going to go ahead and come out, and he leans out and huffs a rock and hit. Junebug was just raising up, and he almost caught Junebug in the head. And so Junebug raised up, and it went right across his stomach. And then it hit me, you know, in my hip. And I was bent over, thank God, with a big jacket, and I had a big pair of gloves in that pocket, and it hit that pocket. And it still Charlie horsed the shit out of me. It hit me hard. It probably came in at 50. It sounds like a pitch coming on Pro League baseball, the way it hits the glove. That's just what it sounds like when it comes in. And it's about 1.5 pound rock, you know, good size. And I got the rock still, you know, we got it cut in half. And that one, you know, it stood up and started talking to him then, because it was pretty scared. And told him, you know, I'll throw this rock back. I know it'll hurt, you know, and this and that. And when we backed up, you had eye shine, three sets come out into us. You can see in the camera, but in the dark, we could just see black subjects coming out into the road without a lot of detail. And that one, the one medium sized one was probably 8 or 9 foot or something, came out behind a tree, not 15 feet from where we were laying, and just stepped out. And then that young one came forward. And then as we were backing up, one more came off from our left. And so even on the film, we got all on video and published it, but it's all through IR, you know, so you can only see what the IR light's showing you. But you can see all 3 sets of eye sign come out as we're moving backwards. We're walking backwards, not turning around, you know. And that was pretty sketchy because, right, we were within grab reach. And, you know, you had no idea at that point where the rock got thrown, then what was going to happen. Because before that, it was all, you know, fun interaction, basically clicking teeth, and they're pitching little pebbles at us and things like this. And but once they hit with the rock, you know, then I don't know after that. So
that one juvie, were you able to actually see him when he threw it? Could you see him
on the IR? You see his eye. There's a post, a white post sticking up there about 4 feet high, 5 feet high or something. I think it's like 5 foot.
Yeah.
And he leans out past that, and then you see his eye come out past that, and his eye opens up, and then wham, I get nailed. And the eye closes back down. He just slowly slides back behind the thing. It's eerie as hell watching him.
Yeah, I bet it is. Well, no, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just curious because I've heard a lot of people say that they think they throw underhanded and not overhanded. I was just curious if you happen to be able to see.
Well, I imagine that's, like I said, a lot of people come up with a lot of ideas. They have a lot of good intentions. They have too much time to think about it.
Yeah.
So, because I imagine they throw any way they want to throw.
I would think so too.
And if he's going to throw over a rock and down into a canyon, well, he's going to throw over because you can't throw under. You know, he's going to wants to put force on it. Well, he's going to do whatever it takes. I know this was a sidearm from an individual who was on all fours and stretched out. So his feet were quite a ways behind him. You know, he wasn't on his knee. We could see he wasn't on his knees, but you or I we would have to be on our knees to be in that position. You know what I mean? So he had his rear legs were stretched out quite a ways back, and he's on one arm and hucked it, you know, on one arm, hooked it sidearm, and was able to put it in probably 50, 60 mile an hour. I think at least. You know, at least it would have killed. It would have killed if he had hit you in the head. It would have been dead. That'd have killed you. It had a broken arm. It had broke ribs. It would have done damage. It wasn't a thing where you'd have caught the rock and gone, "Ow." You know, if I hadn't had the amount of padding and bend over just the way I was, and it caught all that material and the gloves and everything else, and got in that pocket right there, oh yeah, and it still hurt like hell. You know it. Wow. Yeah.
So it was meant to hurt.
It was meant to hurt, and he's just a young one. You know, I doubt it was like, here, I'm going to kill you, but nervous because he wouldn't stop moving around. Everybody else in there was real mellow, and he was coming up and down kind of this little maybe about a 3 foot elevation change was a little swampy section. He was coming in and out of that, in and out of that, in and out of that toward the road there. Oh, there's another one. Hi, Topaz.
Now, have you ever had any encounters with gifting, with them leaving you gifts?
Well, my glasses. And then other than that, I think they exchanged some sap balls. I know that they deal with sap balls. So sap balls is something I know they covet. And one time we came up missing a cat out of nowhere, just missing a cat. And it was real weird, actually, because something opened our front door in the middle of the night. And then one of our cats were gone. And then I found a group of sap balls on a rock right in front of the porch. So I have a feeling he traded me some sap balls for one of our cats.
That's interesting. I wonder what the sap balls mean to them.
I would imagine it's the same thing as the Native Americans. So they use them for oral hygiene, chew them, kills tooth pain.
Oh, okay.
It's just like chewing Listerine. It's a source of vitamin C. So I would imagine that you're going to crave that if your body knows that's in there, and just like other foods, and you're going to actually crave it. So, but I would imagine that's kind of why. And they roll them up, so they're covered in fingerprints, handprints, and stuff. They roll them up in little balls. It's the only thing I've seen them tote around, like on their own. We go places they frequent. I've found their food stashes before. I've found seed stashes and stuff like that where they've taken a rock, pulled it out of a little cavity where there's no other holes or cavities, and then they'll put stuff in that and put the rock back in it. Okay. And you can find that, pull them out, and there'll be a stash, kind of like a squirrel stash, but the only thing is a squirrel couldn't get in it because it's jammed with a rock.
But in a tree, you're talking about a tree, or
in a group of rocks? Yeah.
Oh, you're talking about just okay, gotcha.
Yeah, like a overhang, and you'll find a spot where a rock fits in a cavity real tight.
Yeah.
And pop that out of there, and there'll be food in the back. But there's no squirrel or bear or anything else. Put that rock in there to hide that food.
That's interesting. Never thought of that. That's interesting.
5-pound rock, stuff like that. So
that is interesting. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, they're not easy to find, but yeah.
Huh. Have you ever left them any gifts? Intentionally, besides cats?
Apples. So a lot of times when I'll go in somewhere, like there's a familiar family group that we go work on quite a bit at an area we designated GLST. So a lot of people that follow us will recognize that. And we do that and we put them up that way so people can see repeat studies and they'll understand, they'll recognize, oh, this is that same area or whatever. But whenever I go in there, it's a family unit. It bugs them. They're pretty polite about it, but I don't think they like it. So when I leave apples. I don't leave them and then go check because, a gift is something to give a gift. You're not expecting anything in return. A gift, is something you give. You don't even have to let them know who did it, right? When you give a gift to somebody. So a trade is when you go put something out and you want to experience something in return. Did they move it? Did they put something? That's exchange. But I do the gifting. I really don't do the exchange, but I do gifting. So they know I'm in there. I know I'm in there. They know I'm a pain in the butt. So when I leave, I'll drop off 6-7 apples or whatever at a spot where I know they've been and just leave and not go back. And, in that way, I want to transmit that action of, hey, I'm not trying to bait you. I've got a lot more respect for you. I know you're a lot more intelligent than that. I also know I'm a pain in the butt for being in here. So here, I'll leave you something when I leave. Yeah. And I think that's actually had better response in the end than it would have if I went out with the intention of habituating, because I'm not doing that at that point. I'm just leaving it behind. I'm not habituating the individual, trying to get them used to me. But, I think that being the way these things are, they're not just animals. So, I think that they understand that true gift of giving, that without expectation, I think that goes a long ways, to get in respect. Plus, I've been in there and spooked a big male, and he could have ripped me to pieces. And I know he doesn't like people, you can tell. And he left me alone pretty much. So, let me do my thing.
You were talking earlier about that one that growled at you, and you said you made you sick to your stomach and kind of out of. Has that happened multiple times, or is that the only time you experienced that?
I've been growled at multiple times, but I've never had that.
Never had it affect you that way.
And it's like a 2-part growl. It was like that. And on the video camera, I certainly heard both parts, but on the video camera, you hear the like that, but you don't hear much of the like that. You hear an impact on the camera. You can actually hear an impact in the camera. So that second part, he's really kicking out something hard and deep, real hard.
Do you think that might have been some kind of type of infrasound that he might have,
I'm sure. And the reason I say that is, believe it or not, you can produce infrasound. I mean, that's just any sound below 20 hertz, right? That's not something everyone kind of thinks like, oh, it's this crazy ability and everything. Man, stuff produces infrasound all the time. Or our air conditioner fan can produce infrasound. It's you bang on a tire, you're producing some bit of infrasound. So it's not some exotic ability or anything, right? It's just a component of extremely deep broadcast. And but certainly so. So you can even pick it up on the spectrum analyzer and you look at the sound form, and on all of them they'll have their scale. And if it's large, if the amplitude is larger at the 0 part of the scale than it is at 10, 20, 30, well, then you do have infrasound. You know what I mean? So they produce it quite frequently. Now the deal is, can it be developed and broadcast with enough amplitude or force to cause damage? And I'd say, yeah, but anything that can do that's got real large volume could certainly have the same effect. Even a crocodile produces infrasound. Lions, tigers, crocs, other mammals, elephants, and different things. There's a lot of them. So yeah, I do. Absolutely.
And they seem to know how to control it a lot better than we could even, do ourselves.
Oh yeah, certainly. Yeah.
And I know them being out in the woods, they've probably got all kinds of things that they can do that we can't even fathom.
Right. Yeah. I mean, imagine like your best martial artist, watch Bruce Lee play ping pong with a set of nunchucks. If you ever were
I've seen that.
Yeah. If you ever want to see magic, that's true magic. That's incalculable. It's unbelievable. It's impossible what he could do. Right. Well, he's stepping over the boundary. He's going beyond what the human potential. He's going beyond it. I'm sure they do the same thing. Absolutely. I mean, it's their whole life, like stealth and everything else. When you're hunting deer, everyone thinks, oh, I want to sneak up on the deer so I can get the deer. That's not why you sneak up on the deer. You sneak up on the deer so that next time you want a deer, you can sneak up on the deer. Because if you train those deer to be scared of whatever it is, you're not going to have that opportunity. They're not going to be in that canyon anymore. Deer aren't that dumb either. Absolutely. So if you want to propagate a herd, you can't let them witness you killing off members of the herd. So you're going to learn to be stealthy. You're going to learn to do it at night. You're going to learn to keep your group together. You're going to learn all this stuff so you can manage your herd and have food. And that's why I'll tell you something. In most of the areas where I've seen a propensity of Bigfoot, or we know they are, the deer are less scared of people than they are in areas where the people don't go often. But yeah, they might experience hunters every once in a while or something. And I firmly believe that's because they're around these beings in a non-threatening manner 80-90% of the time. That when they're witnessing these beings and they're around, they're not being threatened by them. It's probably more like the people with their reindeer or the Inuit with their caribou. They eat them, but none of the caribou run away from them, and it's because they're not out there chasing them with sticks and clubbing them and making a big scene. They know how to do it so that they're not offensive to the rest of the herd in a way that they're going to gain fear, right? And that's how I've seen. That's how it's felt when we get out in where those groups are a lot. It seems like they manage the wildlife in a sense. It's less scared of you than, because other places they see a human, they bolt. And you get somewhere where there's a lot of constant Bigfoot activity, a deer will stand there 25 feet from you and just look at you. And it's almost like they don't recognize you at that point. And then they walk looking confused, like, whoa, what are you? But for a moment or two, they fully know you're an erect being, you're a biped, and there's almost a look of familiarity. And it lasts so they're getting that from somewhere. Yeah. I think that's from seeing them quite often, running into each other a lot.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Absolutely. I've heard a lot of stories where people have encountered these things. I guess they describe it as spider crawling. Have you ever seen anything like that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and just like it's similar to what that juvenile was doing. Because his appendages, he could have his appendages way, 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 way out, a lot farther than you and I could potentially do it, unless you were super stout. Yeah, and then, yeah, absolutely. And I've seen them low enough and moving to where they had to be in that position. Mm-hmm. The big male, even that night that George and JC and all them got to look at from about 40 feet away, he was in that position. He was doing that and in that position. And he was a monster male. He's huge. And, it's just no big deal. But you get a human that's in really super, super good shape, and they can kind of pull that same stuff off. It's just the average human can't do it. It's like doing push-ups with 2 fingers. There's a lot of people who can do it, but there's a lot more people who can't, and I think they have that ability because they're always out there, constantly in contact with the environment, and it's always rugged. There is no comfortable zone, no flat ground basically. So yeah, I think pretty much any position they probably want to squeeze into that we could imagine they could do comfortably.
Yeah. Have you spotted them in trees any?
No, never seen one of boreal. No, we've seen marks. So mostly smaller individuals. I've never seen for sure. We've never tracked a big one where it's gone to a tree and gone up a tree that I've ever seen. But I've seen tracks stop. And the only place when you look around, all that can happen is it went a boreal. But you don't see like it walk up to a tree and go up the tree and see marks on the tree. I haven't seen that, but we've seen the little ones do that. So not juveniles. I mean, like smaller toddlers, 3-4 foot, maybe, 5 to 7 inch foot, something like that, 8 inch foot. We've seen those guys. Yeah. Go right up to a tree on all fours, go right up the tree on all fours, leaving muddy hand and feet print all the way up the tree. And so certainly the young ones. And I've seen trees that apparently too many of them or too big a one got into, and the whole tree suffered damage from that much weight being put upon it. I've seen some big stuff broke that looks like they just moving around through it. Not like they were trying to break over the main trunk or anything like that, but just big stuff broken from damage from that you could tell, just big subjects, too big to be moving through, but not like high stuff. So these are like low cottonwood trees and things like that in the river bottoms, like lounging areas or whatever. And then you see where damage looks like that's occurred.
Have you ever found food or carcasses up in trees?
No. No, not that. No, I found a lot of food remnants, but nothing ever actually stuck in a tree that I can recall, hanging in a tree, or seen a lot of it on, reports of it, but not with us. No. I guess most of the ones I spent most of the time around weren't trying to make a point, I guess maybe, or whatever. So everything we've ever seen, food remnant or kill remnant, it's been for eating and been eaten, so nothing ever really left behind too much. Now I've seen livestock killed and drained to the blood and stuff like that, where they punctured the carotid artery and the femoral artery and drained them of blood, sucked them dry. So I've seen a dog sucked dry like a one of them juice pop things you open. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Huh.
Quick salt, quick protein, quick iron. So
yeah.
Each time midwinter after bad blizzardy, high windy storm for a few days. Yeah. And then they'll have seen that happen.
I've got a question here from Blake. What about caves? And you think there's any association with them, with Bigfoot?
Sure. Absolutely. Different Bigfoot. So if they have the opportunity to use a cave, I'm sure they're going to. Caves are a little questionable because they're pinch points. So a cave may be great shelter, but it's also an easy place to get trapped. So I think caves are probably utilized as much as they can find caves that they don't have to fear interference. Literally, I've seen a lot of overhangs and shallow caves that either had feet print in them or some other form of evidence in them, like temporary, where they've grabbed something to eat, gone up into a cave or overhang, eaten it, and then leave. But we've never found sign of long-term occupation of any kind whatsoever. Hit and go type stuff, utilization. So deep caves, I don't know. I don't have any experience with them in deep caves. Generally past 50 feet, you don't have anything. Cats will go pretty deep sometimes, but almost nothing else. But
yeah. What about have you ever been invited in? Do you ever get calls from people and end up going out to habituation areas or habituation sites, private properties where we
do get calls, but not necessarily a habituation area where somebody has been dealing with like a specific group or anything. No, not normally. And we don't really respond or do that kind of work. So,
okay.
But we do respond to a lot of landowners that have activity that don't know what to do. Or like up on the res, after we did the research up there, Chief Dan up there, one of the elders in Navajo res, had us come back up because one of them below their farm field was coming up out of the river bottoms and had showed himself in broad daylight to a young girl that was there at the house from about a quarter mile across the field. And so we actually went up and tracked him back out and let him know that, you know, you shouldn't be coming up to the house. You come up here, we'll follow you home. And, you know, got his activity to stop. So we've responded and dealt with a few trying to, you know, curb behavior, and see what's doing stuff, you know. Most of the time it's pretty self-apparent, but
yeah, from stuff I've heard, it almost seems like they have an interest when it comes to women or children. You know?
Yeah, and you don't know if it's innocent or not.
Yeah, exactly. You don't know what the intentions are.
Yeah, and like I've said to others, it's like people say, well, do you think they are mean, or do you think they are nice? Do you think they are aggressive? Do you think they would do this or they would do that? Man, anybody that knows animals well enough, has owned or raised a lot of animals, especially when you really get to know your animals, every one of them is different, and everyone has the potential to do just about anything. It all depends on the moment, their history, what they've gone through. I mean, that's it. And it can be as completely random as anything else. That's part of the fear or the respect, not fear of nature. You want to have respect, and that's what that is. You know, it's the respect isn't like, oh, I admire you. Respect is like, I know you at any moment you could rip my head off for no reason whatsoever. And that's to respect, to tread lightly in their grounds, you know. Yeah. So there's so much conjecture, and a lot of it's good and it's honest and it's well thought and everything, but there's so much conjecture about habits, about like you said, about their tendencies, aggression, and all this kind of stuff. And I've experienced from the same subjects totally different responses. Like George, the young juvenile, I've been around a lot, and he's real cool. Except when Dad was there the day I ran into him, George didn't act so cool. So around Dad, no, he wasn't. You know, he was like, yeah, let's bug the human. You know, let's scare the human.
He probably has rules he's supposed to be following, huh?
Yeah, basically, or you know, you want to be the man when Dad's there. You know, you want to show off. You want to be the tough guy now. So I'm just the unlucky recipient, so he could show off a little to Daddy. You know, so that's innocent change in behavior. But you know, we've seen everything from. I didn't personally see this. We responded part of it, but everything from a horse ripped in half, you know, to bringing pork chop bones to the dog, you know. So the realm of behavior, that the limit is off the charts. It's all over the place.
Did they eat the horse? Did they eat it?
No, they were just pissed off. That one also ripped the front legs off a cow and stuffed the cow in a culvert alive.
Really?
So, yeah. Knocked a trailer house off its foundations, tore the air conditioner out of the window, stuff like that. He was pissed. Just not a happy camper.
The blood draining, why do you think they do that?
Salt, iron, and protein.
So you think they drink it?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, I do. And I think they purposely put them down without killing them. Because the animal, and then they puncture arteries, and
so they can, yeah.
Animal pumps itself dry.
Yeah.
Minutes and minutes.
Never thought of that either, but yeah, that makes sense too.
Yeah, same. I mean, there's tons and tons of native tribes around the world that do the same thing. So, you know, in the Kalahari in Africa, those guys do the same thing. They keep cattle. They puncture the carotid artery. They get some in a bowl. They drink it. They bathe in it. They do everything else, and they don't kill the cow when they're doing it. It's all part of life. And, you know, they bathe in the urine, they drink the blood, basically. And it's because it's life or death. And especially when we do a little bit of the research and showing, like, especially after 3-4 days in an extreme high wind, super cold condition, whether or not it's snowing or not, the body gets depleted of certain nutrients, and those nutrients can be replaced by blood. So when we see activity like that, that's generally the times we've seen it. So after when they've had to bend downs for some time. Also, when we've looked at it, it's not usually like the older adults doing this. So these are foot sizes anywhere from, you know, 12 inches to 15 inches, stuff like that. So you're talking probably kids who aren't supposed to be out doing shit like that, but know how to do it, and they're going out and hitting the livestock. And I think that's most of your raids you see, most of your activity you have around houses, most of that stuff is kids. You know, it's just like Native Americans. You know, there's been whole battles started just by the 14, 15-year-old young natives going out and doing what they weren't supposed to do at night pissing off the cavalry, and the next day the cavalry come slaughter everybody. And with no giving that it was a couple of young guys who were just feeling their oats and being stupid. And I think they do this very same thing. You're talking to young teenagers and that the early adolescents, doing what they want to do and getting into trouble. And I don't think that goes over well with a family group either, because, they don't take the kill. And it's kind of like, obviously, like, wait a second, why'd you leave the kill behind if well, you couldn't take it home? Because I'm sure if you showed up with a goat, all hell's probably going to break loose down there. Where the hell did you get this goat? Now they're going to come try to kill us all. So I think that much logic is there. And I'm not just putting that onto them. I'm doing that from hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of examples that would require that much logic being applied in the situation, because people try to put our traits on animals. We try to impose that upon something to understand something. We try to make it human so we can come from a human understanding, but that's the way they act. And I mean, that's the way they do, so because we don't see activity from the larger individuals, zero. And all those ranches and landowners in these areas have no clue they're there. No stories, no tales, no legends. They see a weird thing here and there every once in a while. And they don't even know what it is. We've had reports of giant long hair, furry mountain lion walking around in the river bottoms. We know there's no giant long hair, furry, mountain lion. That doesn't exist. I mean, that'd be weirder than a Bigfoot. We know what that is that people are seeing. So we don't try to influence that in that area. We don't try to really, bring it up and say, oh, well, this is what you guys are experiencing. We have a little bit on some of the kills, and it's never received very well. And that's good. It's like, cool. If you guys don't want to believe they're here, cool. Whatever you want to do. I'd build a better enclosure next time.
Right. Well, they're definitely intelligent. I've always thought when we were talking about tendencies earlier that they're probably opportunists. They're intelligent enough that they probably are careful about how they, for example, Sam Houston here. There's a lot of people that come in there. They probably know that we got to be careful here. We got to watch what we do. We don't want to, if we do something we shouldn't, we might have a bunch of people coming here looking for us.
Yeah. And I mean, if they are real, and if this is real, and if this is happening, blah, 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 all this, if there's any credence to any of this, it has to be that way.
Yeah. Because
we're finding them where they are, and we're not seeing that big social impact, cultural impact going on of the monster down the street.
Yeah. So
it's subtle. It's so subtle, incredibly. And you see whole family units tucked away in places like that. And sometimes I think it's more convenient because you don't look right under your nose, basically, to find stuff.
Yeah.
And if they can squeeze in an area where it's like that, where, there's a lot of places next to cities that in a sense are more remote than the wilds, because there's all kinds of drainage areas and reservoirs and old canals and rock quarries and all kinds of stuff like that have resources and that are thick and abandoned, where there's no people, and being big private holdings and private lands and things. There's so many spots like that near cities that are perfect that no one goes on at all. It's not like a national forest or anything else that, has roads through it and people every weekend, and campgrounds and hikers and maintain trails, forestry guys cutting it. So, we see, you see them in areas where you don't expect them to be, but if you really take a good logical look, assume that they are that intelligent, well, then it does make sense for this evidence we're finding in these locations. It does begin to make a lot of sense. It's not a strange thing, Right. They're just that smart. We underestimate them way too much, and then we have to give them these magical abilities because we underestimate them.
Yeah.
I'm running into this all the time, and I try to tell people, and everybody wants to believe what they want to believe, and that's cool. But I try to give some ground set for reality. And open their minds a little bit to what could be occurring. And I'll go there. So one of the things would be, let's say tracks that vanish in a snowy field. Okay, you got a big open snowy field, Bigfoot tracks going halfway across it, vanish into thin air. Well, the conclusions people make based on that, you have no information other than, you have no information. You have zero. So because nothing is past the point the tracks vanish. So you have zero. So it's all conjecture, correct? So then you have to look at what's logical. And you have to say, well, everyone looks at it just in the Bigfoot context. They don't look at it in the context of disappearing tracks. So what you've got here, you don't have a disappearing Bigfoot because you don't know that. All you know is you have a set of tracks that disappear. Okay, so let's find. So how many other sets of tracks are out there that disappear? If it's only Bigfoot tracks disappearing, then you say, well, that might be a trait we can attribute to only a Bigfoot. Okay, but if deer tracks disappear, if whatever else tracks vanish right on sand and snow and mud, places that they shouldn't, what if human tracks disappear? Okay, so does that mean the human had the ability to, let's say, open a portal and walk through to another dimension? Well, no. Is that even what we're going to think? The simple reason the way we impose that upon a Bigfoot is because that's what some people want to think. They want to give them that ability because then there's a good excuse for how he outdoes me in the field. There's a good excuse for how he vanished, because certainly I would know better. But that's the arrogance of a human being, thinking we would know better, that we can't be outdone just because something is better than us.
Right.
You know, and when I see vanishing footprints, what I do is I say, okay, well, that's vanishing footprints. How many cases? You know, I'm going to tell you, there's been cases of deer prints vanishing to nowhere. There's been cases of other animals vanishing, and humans. There's been lots of cases of human prints in a snowy field going to nowhere, and that person never being seen again. Now, do we honestly believe that person intentionally opened a portal and walked into another dimension? I don't. Do I believe the deer do that? I don't. Do I believe that something, somewhere, is treating all those things equally and helping them to disappear or whatever? Yeah, that's most likely. Is there's a common thing with all those individuals. Not that there's a commonality with these three and not this one. You know, with this one, it's a special trait, but the rest of them, oh, we got to forget about that. And that's what we talk about with the Bigfoot, and that's what people call the woo. And it's not because people are wrong or anything else. It's just they don't look deeper. They just don't look deeper. And I've seen so much and been able to track where others saw them vanish. Native American and whites and other people, just doesn't matter their background, where they swear they disappeared, and then be able to go and find the marks and tracks from that point forward. Like I thought the other day, I'd like to put out, you know, a list of Bigfoot prints. You know, we've all seen that. You know, you see wolves and you got wolverines and you got this and that and this and that and this and that. And they think, well, that's what their prints look like. I guarantee you, there's hardly any, maybe 1 in 10,000 people that know what Bigfoot prints look like. And I don't mean the feet print, because they don't use their feet most of the time. I'm talking the edge of their hand and their pinky finger, 2 fingers, 2 knuckles. They do 2 fingers a lot. So they'll move around on 2 fingers a lot. And if it looks like it on a big one, looks like cow prints. You'll walk right by them. Nobody will catch them. Maybe if you see one where the hand is similar size to us, our brain will pick it out. But other than that, they're moving on so many different surfaces and in such different ways than we expect them to, that people think, oh, well, they just vanished. Well, they don't realize he can take a 12-foot sidestep from that position. You don't even know he did it. They're so light he can do it barely shoving off the ground if he's not in a hurry. And then land on toes and fingers over there to where he's barely leaving any kind of a mark, even big ones. And to even just be able to track that takes a hell of a tracker. It's not just like some Johnny homemaker goes out there for the day and goes and he sees the track stop. Often there might be a tree within 15 feet and they don't realize that what they can do. They can leap 15, 20 feet and go arboreal and not leave a print in between. And I tell them this is like tracking a master tracker that doesn't want to be tracked. He's going to fool you, you know? And so when sure, we're having all kinds of different situations occur, right? They're not all the same thing. When we see tracks vanish, it's not all the same thing and all the same reason, no more than it is a Bigfoot can do that, yet a deer vanishes and a big deer can't, you know? So the logic in that, you know, I think it needs to be applied a lot more in the field as far as that stuff goes. And there's a whole bunch of it that way. I mean, I've even seen DARPA projects back in the 80s where they were developing suits based on carbon nanofibers. The suit itself was a mech suit. Also had full environmental systems inside for a human to be inside of it. The suit it was like a mech suit, but it was soft mech, let's say. So it could take any form it wanted to and act in any method it wants to. If the suit's to get shot, the fibers could quick enough, could react to the bullet, harden, repel the bullet. If something did pierce the suit, it can respond to the human itself and put pressure on the wound from the inside of the suit. And the suit does all this, and there's no parts, just carbon nanofibers. Now, they had this technology in the late 80s. Now, I know one thing. I'm not stupid. If I was ever going to utilize it, something like that, and I knew that there was legends of a big fuzzy creature worldwide, I would just make my suit look like a big fuzzy creature and sneak onto any military base anywhere in the world in my big cool fuzzy suit. And who knows, would it have LCD fiber optic technology like they showed us in the late 80s that you could put an object behind and it looked like a carpet kind of, and you could put an object behind it and it would film the object behind it, produce it on the front. You'd never see through it. Scattering field. So, and an optic scattering field, an actual live one, not prismatic, an actual projection. We've had that since the late 80s. So DARPA does everything. If you can think of it, they've done it or they've tried it, and determine whether or not it's good or not. I can certainly conceive of all that. And these are off-the-shelf technologies that we know that they developed. Now, they're sure nobody can afford them, right? DARPA can. But where do they test any of this stuff? What do they do with any of this stuff? What would you do with it if you had it? How would you constantly train and evaluate personnel? How do we know that a number of the odd things that we're not seeing aren't people literally in some of this hyper advanced equipment? I don't see how they wouldn't use it. I mean, I really don't, because now we've got all these stories coming up about, oh yeah, we have an engineer over here and a scientist over there, and they witness these beings making it through 4 levels of security, and they're all of a sudden at the main camera at the main gate, and they're right in front of the camera, and then they're gone. Well, why would they go up to the front of a camera at the main gate anyway? You know, there's a point to that you'd have to step into the ridiculous to think that's just a Bigfoot going up to the camera in the main gate and waving to the camera in the main gate. It's much more likely that it's a black project experimenting and breaking the security on their own secure sites. And that since the tech exists, why in the world wouldn't it be? So we have to factor all this in. If we look and don't go through this research and don't factor in all these other things, like the tracks vanishing, but that happens to people and so many other animals. That's got a third party. Like them themselves cloaking or doing it. Well, we've got DARPA projects that literally spell that exact same thing out. So we have to factor these in because they do exist. It's like a buddy of mine, Jerry Gray. I wrote this the other day. Walked off one day and he came back in the afternoon. We were living in a real remote location in the Arizona desert, mining gold, and real remote, about 5 hours in there to get there. So, and Jerry walks off down the riverbed one day and he comes back a few hours later and he looks a little bit distraught, but not a lot bugged Jerry. And he was, he's an old mentor of mine. So, and he'd been nom and a bunch of stuff. And he said he was walking and it was hotter than hell. And he just had a thought to himself, damn, it's hotter than hell. And he felt a little dizzy and he thought that was the heat. And his eyes blurred. And he said he was about to sit down because he thought he was about to pass out. And everything felt real thick around him. And he said right then, he said, all of a sudden it just stopped and it went back to normal real quick. And he felt fine. But he wasn't where he started. So he was another like quarter mile, half mile down the river. So somehow, and he was feet print everything. He said he turned around, his prints weren't there, and he went back to where it happened, and there were his prints, leading to nowhere, vanishing in the sand. So what happened to Jerry? Jerry didn't mean to do that. Something happened. Jerry walked into something and walked out of it a half mile away in a fraction of a second. Now, there's you another world or a time displacement or out of phase or whatever that is, right? But that shows you that exists as well. So what's really happening in all this? It's all conjecture for us to go there. You know, that's almost like that's why we don't go there. I try to stick with what we see and then factor that into the reality of it. Like, okay, let's say that they're from off world, right? And they have craft and they come down here to enjoy our nice little pretty blue rock. Why in the hell do they go hungry in cold weather? Why do they vomit? Why do they get bloody stool or diarrhea? Why would they eat a porcupine? You know, these are questions that I've witnessed all those things. And so this is not something that has the ability to blip back out of here and go use the bathroom, blip back out of here and go get medical attention, eat whatever it wants to. I mean, eat a porcupine. I mean, that's probably because there was nothing else to eat, you know, and I mean, literally passed a porcupine through the digestive system, found in the scat, found porcupine quills. or eating sand and algae when there's nothing else. And they're just literally packing down sand and algae and then crapping sand, green sand. These are from animals that are hungry, that can't go get a meal anywhere else. This is something that's stuck right where it's at. You know, I've seen them be scared and anxious because of activity and they can't get away. We've tracked them into positions where they're stuck. They can't go anywhere. They're not walking off in any other world. They're panicking. You know, so these are realities of a living species that is governed by the same laws that you and I are in the natural world. Sure, there's exceptions. There was a preacher in Russia that preached in 2 different locations on the same day, 2,000 miles apart. He was known to do it, logged and documented. No one ever knew how he got to each location. So there was also a shaman in Russia, well documented, had been arrested a couple times, brought into court. And every time they put him in jail, he vanished. And the inmates say he turned into a bird, and it happened more than once. And then they took that same guy, locked him up good with a couple of guys, went and got him in the forest again, brought him down and take him into court. And when they walked through the door room, both the guards were then handcuffed to a stick. They never saw that guy again. That's documented in the Russian court cases. So that this guy was doing it. So I can't do it and you can't do it, but I'm just not saying that somebody can't, right? So when we say, oh, well, Bigfoot they can all walk through portals and they're all magic and they're all this and that, right? Thanks, babe. So when we do stuff like that, that's too much. When we do stuff like that, you're talking that these guys are more regulated, almost like we are. Like maybe, sure, they're shaman, maybe they're elders, maybe whatever. It's like it's the same thing with ninjas or whatever. Well, sure, man, these guys could hide. A black guy all dressed in black could hide in a white hallway. How's he doing that? He's not invisible. He's making it so the people can't see him. Well, that's something that he's learned. So he doesn't just join up to the group and can do it from birth. It's not a natural trait that he has. It's something he's acquired. So far, just about everything I've seen that's attributed to Bigfoot on that end, on that magic side, I've seen attributed to Native American shaman. So all of it, walking in 2 worlds, the whole 9 yards. If you want, hold on a sec, babe, if you want, you can flip the switches on the back of that. Turn the spectrum down on that light if you want. Here, I'll show you. Let's see. No, not that one. Let's do that one. It's a little yellow. That ain't so bad. So I think that we need to factor in all this stuff, and honestly, everybody together in the field needs to come together and just open up. Stop the conclusions quite so much. Let's open everything back up, put it all back into brackets where it goes, and let's start weighing this with everything else that's going on so we can get a lot better perspective. And those people that have a firm belief that they've seen something disappear or vanish, I'm not asking them to question what they believe. I'm asking them to take a look at what they've seen and then factor in what are the other possibilities, because what is really going on. Sure, let's say UFOs and Bigfoot. Man, we've seen UFOs work with just about every animal on the planet. People have seen them drop fish out and right next to a pond to where the people all ran over and scooped a ball of fish and threw them in the pond and coming out of a craft in the sky. And we've seen all types of interactions with animals and humans to say that to glean that there's more of a connection, with the Bigfoot and a UFO than there is anything else is another one. I mean, look at Travis Walton. His friends saw him get nailed by a beam of light by a UFO. Okay, well, people have seen Bigfoots in the beam of light of a UFO. Go ask Travis how that felt. It wasn't fun for him. Who's to say that it's fun for that Bigfoot, or they're not doing the same thing to the Bigfoots they are to the people and the other animals? So, but you'll see where they'll form that conclusion that, oh, it must have something to do with cooperation with aliens. You see what I'm saying? And we no one knows that. We don't know that for sure. The highest propensity is that they're actually a victim of the same type of stuff we are, vanishing in place for no reason. Alien abduction, whatever that happens to be, the whole 9 yards. And I think that sure they've got their abilities honed, their natural abilities honed, at least in the elders for sure. I mean, astral projection, lots of people do that, don't know it. People all the time, they'll have a feeling their child is hurt from 1,000 miles away and they'll be dead on. They'll even see it happen. they're there. You know, there's no distance to the mind. Science has actually proven remote viewing, astral traveling. Science has proven these things. So when natives say, well, they walk in two worlds. All right, that's two worlds. That doesn't mean stepping from this world into another world, and you're still just walking in one world. It's not, they're talking walking in two worlds. Take it literally. He's sitting against a tree over there somewhere a half mile away, and his spirit's right up here in your campsite. And sure, you might see the manifestation of an orb, because that's the way that those energies often manifest, with ghosts, with other things. Sure, but that doesn't mean that that's a separate deal and the Bigfoot here and that. No, that might be the intellect of the Bigfoot over here checking you out, and his body might be over there laying on a tree somewhere, just like the Native Americans would, just like the guys do in the remote viewing CIA program. Their chair's over here, but they're over there hovering over a submarine base in Russia. You know, who's to know if you might have a light ball anomaly over there? But that's much more likely that it is being what they mean, you know, walking in two worlds, he's stepping into a parallel dimension somewhere. You know, and in dimensional studies, you actually learn that there's one dimension and then there's different phases of that dimension. So there's not really another realm of a dimensional realm. So that's the way that the common person envisions those physics. Those physics don't really dictate that. So in other words, you know, I ask people all the time, I mentioned it the other day in my Facebook, I said, when you swing your arm around, it's in a different dimension, your hand's in a different dimension than your shoulder. And it is. It's wherever you want to draw the line. Any motion. That's the theory of relativity that states dimensions can exist, right? So when we talk about that, there's nowhere else to walk into. You can go out of phase and not be in phase with us and not be anywhere, but when you walk back, you're going to walk back. So you change locations, but you're going to be right back here again, in this reality again. And that's the way it really works. There's not another realm to go stepping into. And people can, I mean, there's a lot of ways people visualize these things that are not, you can't be visualized, you know what I mean? Like one object in two places at the same time, like particle physics. You know, you can't wrap your head around how you can do something to one particle here and its identical particle responds no matter what the distance is instantaneously. We have a hard time wrapping our head around that. We have to draw some kind of a folding piece of paper or something to imagine it when space isn't folded, you know, but that's what we have to call it. That's the same thing we experience when we have this stuff happening with the Bigfoot. We may never be able to quantify it. Can you quantify a parrot that knows that they've, you know, experimented on? They know when the master or whatever is in another building where it can't be heard, can't do anything, but the parrot knows they're over there. Or dogs do it all the time, right? They know the master's coming home and say, oh, they heard his truck coming. He's 30 minutes away. He's on a freeway. There's 500 Ford pickups between him and that dog. I'd say he didn't hear his master coming home. He knows he's coming home, right? So, you know, that other realm is something that you can't quantify or say that it's that simple. And I don't think it's that special. I think all of us can do all of the things we're witnessing. We can all do. And by putting it up on this huge tier and making it this magical, mystical ability, that's just in a sense insulting them, and it's insulting us. He's more in tune. There's no doubt, no disbelief in a creature like that. And that's what I've witnessed, right? So they do what they do, and they expect the result they expect, and they just go for it. We second guess, evaluate, weigh every single thing there is. And I'm sure they do that. That's forethought. But they don't do it before they react to an inner voice. There's none of this, oh, man, I knew I should have turned left. I knew I shouldn't have done that right before it happened. Oh, man, I should have listened to There's none of that with them. They do. They react. They act. They live on that voice. So when there's someone in the environment, they don't go, well, yeah, they're talking and someone will pop up and go, yeah, I had a feeling a little while ago there was someone. I had a feeling. No, they're not. No, they do. It's not a feeling they get. They get it. You know, there's a connection. There's no doubt in their mind of what they do. And that gives you an ability. You know, belief seems to be the factor, even with telekinesis, telepathy, all kinds of real sketchy stuff. Belief seems to be the factor. If it's a big deal and you have to believe it, it's very difficult. You got to go through tons of ceremony. But if you don't think about it and it just comes natural, it's effortless. Well, that's because of a belief factor. Lady's going to lift a car off her kid, right? There's no room for it not to move. So it moves, right? Well, there you go. That's how these things are. So who knows how much strength they could utilize, how much speed they could utilize. Who knows if you're going to see them when you look at them, because maybe they don't want you to see them, and so your brain up here takes them out of the picture. There's people that can do that now to other people. So should we trust our eyes? Not really. Right? Should we trust our perception of the event? Not really. Right? We have to take all these things with a grain of salt, and then we have to use our logic and apply the fringe science as well as apply standard science, but we have to apply it in a scientific way. It's got to be science. We can't just say, oh, well, it vanished, so it did this. You know what I mean? Or even if we hear a voice in our head, there's a good reason in the good book that it says, seek not familiar spirits, because you don't know if that's your alter ego, your super ego, your conscious, your subconscious. You have no idea what that is. And it's arrogant to think that you understand well enough what's coming into my mind that it must be this. And it could be anything, literally anything. And from even right down to our own imagination, and us not know it. And so those things, people should step back like 3 steps and say, okay, cool. Because here really is an outstanding creature. I mean, humans are badass. I'll give them that, right? We've got all our feelings, everything does. But these things are something else. It's like they've got something we're lacking. They're free. They've got the intellect, they've got the ability, they've got the emotion, they've got all this stuff, but they're free. They got us beat. It's like they're top tier without screwing a damn thing up. And what they represent is not only our freedom, but our abilities, our inherent abilities. So you can see the powers that be love to interject all types of information about the woo. As much as they do about they don't exist, they'll also say they do exist in all the woo, because they don't want us to connect with them. They don't want us to familiarize ourselves. That's why it's always Gigantopithecus or some other ape, or even a relic hominin, because they really don't want us to start to rationalize and start to familiarize ourselves and realize that, holy shit, wait a second. Those are people, and they don't have to abide by any of these rules, taxes, boundaries, laws. Wait a second. They get up and they hear crickets and they look at butterflies and they do whatever the heck they want to do. And they have a sense of freedom. And at the same time, look at their ability to be in nature and do without all the things we have. And then look how outstanding they are at it. Blows us away. And so that's a big thing. That's why I want people to step back, man, a few steps and rationalize all of this. Even the weird stuff. It's not weird. What do you mean paranormal? It's normal. That's something that always bothered me, because it's not abnormal. It's not paranormal. It's not supernatural. It's normal. It's natural. But by imposing those terms on it, we make that into another world that's odd and unattainable. No, man, we should have all this stuff every day in all of our lives because it's all normal, And what is it? Europe's the only ones that ever do that. All these other countries, and especially the more primitive they are, the more they're into it. Oh yeah, no, that's part of it. Trust me, that's a big deal. Well, the Europeanized thing is like, no, none of that exists. So certainly this beast doesn't even exist. It can't even exist. What are you talking about? The wonder's gone. We've looked and found everything. So, But anyway, not to go on too long.
No, that's great. And that's you make a lot of great points, and you're right. There's so many factors that you gave me a lot to think about for sure. And there's so many factors to look into. I mean, so many factors that we have to consider when dealing with the subject. You're right. Yeah.
I mean, we want truth, right? I mean, isn't that ultimately what everybody wants, even if it's not the truth they really want to hear. Ultimately, don't you just want truth?
Yes.
And we can't dictate it, like science and not looking at the Bigfoot question. That's not science. I've been put that before. Science is only the study of the unknown.
Yeah.
Once it's known, it's actually not science anymore. Science is a process of discovery. And so what do you mean we're not going to study it because it doesn't exist? Nothing existed before you studied it, apparently, did it? It was all rumor. It was all conjecture. It was all theory. It was all legend. Everything that you didn't see was a legend, right? So that's science. So, but you'll notice that the whole aspect of science can be flipped and thrown out the window completely when it comes to some. Yeah. And that's the same thing. In order for us to crack that door open, we're going to have to crack our own doors open. in order to break their supposition on what exists and what doesn't, we have to do the very same thing. We can't conclude that this is happening or that's happening, until we've got something to back it up, or we're never going to get to truth. We're just going to keep stirred in this muddy water over and over. And I see, everybody's frustrated with it, no matter what side they maintain. You see this frustration everywhere in this. And like I said, we're not even necessarily a Bigfooter. I just want to slam the truth in everybody's face. They can deal with it how they want to.
Yeah. True enough.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we are an hour and 30 minutes in. I think this would be a good time to call it.
All right.
I appreciate you coming on. I really do. And thank you, my co-host.
Absolutely. Yeah, Robert, really enjoyed it, and really appreciate you coming on. And you had some fascinating things to say, and definitely you gave me some food for thought. Definitely.
Right. Well, good. I mean, that's all I want to do is open doors.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the minds of people, in the hearts of people, and better yet, knock down the ones in academia and everybody else. The only way we're going to put enough pressure on them is if we do it right.
Yeah.
And the only way we're going to do it right is if we don't get lost in too many fancies and we
bring everybody together on the same page, huh?
Yeah, on at least some basis. There has to be some base ground that we can all stand on and think however we want after that. But I want to thank you guys for having me on this evening. It was my pleasure. I'm proud to be here. I'm glad to meet you both. I think this has been real good.
Yeah.
You too. I look forward to seeing you at the conference. I really do. Yeah,
we look forward to being there. So we're going to try to do the best we can. We'll bring a few surprises.
All right.
Oh, I'm looking forward to it.
Me too.
Okay. Good deal. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Robert, very much.
Mm-hmm.
Have a good evening.
My name is Josh, and welcome to Hide and Seek Archives, a podcast where we talk about things supernatural, cryptid, or unexplained.